So if it wasn't for one trade that would get super scrutinized if it happened today, the Portland Trail Blazers would not have Damian Lillard. Back in 2012, the New Jersey Nets, they were not the Brooklyn Nets just yet, were not good. They were below 500 at the trade deadline, which was in March, a little later than normal because it was a lockout year. But they weren't good. I mean, at one point they were 15-30. Earlier than that, they were 10-25. Like there was not a question about whether this Nets team was good at any point this season. They were a bad team, and these were, of course, the Nets under Billy King, and I'm assuming Prokhorov was around at this point, where they were just so desperate to be good that they just skipped the whole build it up process, and they figured, who needs draft picks anyway? So, after not getting Dwight Howard, because that was a thing, they were all in on getting Dwight, and that was a big story from the Magic that year about what's Dwight going to do, and eventually he extended on a 1-year deal before ending up in LA, but basically, it was a first-round pick, top 3 protected, that's all it was, just top 3, to the Blazers for Gerald Wallace, and there were a couple other players who moved around. And then that became the 6th pick. The Blazers got Damian Lillard, and they're reaping the benefits to this day and then some. Now, like I mentioned earlier, I think if this trade happened now, there would be just so much of wait, what are they doing? Because, again, you had a bad team trading their first-round pick, and they only put a top 3 protection on it. I mean, I think the realistic version of this trade is the realistic version is not doing it, because anybody could have told you Gerald Wallace was not worth giving up a first-round pick for. But if you were really going to trade your first-round pick as a lottery team for an okay NBA player, who was, at this point, I believe, past 30 years old. He was 29. If you were going to do that, then you were going to have to do a top 10 protection or something on it. Again, you don't do the trade, but if for some reason you're going to, you got to go deeper than top 3. I mean, if you dive into the news story on it, or an article that has sort of an insider take on it, the Blazers were shocked that those were the protections. They figured it was going to be a lot deeper than that. I think Portland would have been content with getting a couple of second-rounders for Gerald Wallace. I mean, the 2012 Blazers were not good, and they were a really weird team of something. They were very weird in the sense of midway through the year, they were 17-16, but they had a lot of close losses, which suggested that they were actually good and just a couple shots weren't bouncing their way or whatever. And they fell off pretty fast. So I think they proved to be right in not really believing in that team. And they saw an opportunity to get off of Wallace, and it was a great move. I mean, that Portland team, if we can dive into them a little bit more, it was a weird mix of random NBA players. The only ones who really made sense were LaMarcus Aldridge, Wesley Matthews, and Nicholas Batum, the guys who, of course, would play together and make the good starting 5. And I guess Joel Prisbilla, because he was a really good backup center for a long time. But besides that, you're looking at Raymond Felton, J.J. Hickson, Gerald Wallace, Over the Hill, Jamal Crawford, who had some moments before and after this season on various teams, but this season it just seemed like, for whatever reason, the role that they asked him to play just didn't really work, even if it was just being a 6th man. Jamal Crawford was always inefficient, and he was even more inefficient for these guys. But even with all that said, again, some teams would look at that team and, 20-something games in and think, we're 14-10, and we're losing a bunch of games by only a couple points. We're pretty good. We just need to make one move, and then we can go on some sort of playoff run. Nope. The Blazers were just this team's not going anywhere. And we applaud them for thinking that, not only because it turned into Damian Lillard, but also because we see what can go wrong when you go all in on the other direction, which is sacrificing the future for an instant reward that isn't that good in the long term, aka Gerald Wallace, for the Brooklyn Nets. Now, it should be mentioned, I don't think the Nets would have selected Dame if they had more protections on the pick or just didn't do the trade at all. Because I just figure they would have been all in on Deron Williams, and no, those two can't play together. And if that same thing popped up today, you would hope they would just take Dame if they thought he was the best player, but they really believed it was only a 3-player draft with Anthony Davis, Michael Kidd-Gilchrist, and Thomas Robinson. That's another thing that you can find is Billy King and the Nets front office just thought it was 3 guys and then it fell off. I mean, MKG ended up being not that good. Thomas Robinson was a bust. And then between Dame, Bradley Beal, Harrison Barnes, Andre Drummond, there's a lot of things to be said about Andre Drummond, but for the 9th pick, not bad, certainly. Although they had Brook Lopez, so they wouldn't have taken him either. But that's another mentality that you just can't have. You can never go into a draft thinking that you don't need to draft someone when you're not good. This sounds pretty basic, but I do really feel like the Prokhorov, Billy King years of the Nets, and I believe I said this in the Celtics trade video, but that era has just really taught all of us to value draft picks and care about the age of a player, and an instant improvement might not be the best thing, even if it's nice in the moment. There's all these things that I feel like are just ingrained into our heads because we saw the Nets just deal with the aftermath of bad trades, this being another one. Even if they end up with, Harrison Barnes, okay, that's probably who they select. They effectively traded for an older Harrison Barnes with Gerald Wallace, right? Even that would have been nice. Barnes would have fit in well enough there. He certainly would have been better than Gerald Wallace. The next year, Wallace averaged 7 points, and his efficiency was horrible. So yeah. Or they could have, they were very aggressive with moves, as we know. They could have traded Harrison Barnes for something, I don't know, if they just wanted to do that. And then if we talk about it more from the Blazers side, it's been the franchise-defining move, basically. If they don't make this move, or if they just simply draft somebody else, then do the Blazers do much of anything over this decade? I know that they haven't taken that next jump as a team or anything, but it's certainly better than not having Damian Lillard. Now, as I always like to do, if I can attempt to defend the Nets a little bit, how could this trade have gone well for them? The big thing would have been if Gerald Wallace just didn't fall off a cliff. For a decent chunk of his career, Gerald Wallace was kind of awesome as this defender who was really athletic and could finish inside and grab rebounds and play the 4. I feel like he could have played some small ball 5. I don't think he was really asked to do it ever, but I feel like he could have a little bit. He only made 1 all-defense team. I feel like Gerald Wallace should have made more. There's a few years there where he was getting 2 steals and 1.5 blocks a game or whatever. I don't know. But anyway, let's say that move still happens. The Nets get him, and what he did, his last year in Charlotte, 16 points, 8 rebounds, 1 steal, 1 block a game. What if he just kept doing that, and he was able to age pretty well, and he was able to play until he was 33, 34 years old, and be kind of a glue guy for the Nets as they were trading for scorers and stuff between Joe Johnson and, of course, there was the Paul Pierce and KG trade and all that. That would have been the way to do it. That would have been the hope, I guess. And we will be honest, part of the reason why this is even a thing is because Damian Lillard was selected. If Terrence Ross was the guy selected at number 6, this wouldn't be as big of a thing, but even then it would still be kind of a thing, because it's you traded a first-round pick when you were bad, for a guy who, at that point in his career, was okay. Although I guess they needed Deron Williams to re-sign, so maybe that's the only defense they need. I don't know.